Good evening. I have some thoughts and goals. After my last video I did on Disloyal, which is a book written by Michael Kuhlman, Trump's personal lawyer, and I read his book and it was just really interesting. Got me thinking about a lot of topics. Um, since the pandemic started in March of 2020, that was 7 months ago. It's October 13 at 11 o'clock at night. I, it's just personally my world, my viewpoints have changed a lot, and so I've done a lot of thinking and a lot of reading, and then some more thinking, and it's time to put some of these thoughts down. First on paper, but then publish them, talk through them, and get them kind of stamped and sent out. And so the way I know how to do that is to upload YouTube videos and record it and talk myself through it. But I sat down this morning and put my thoughts down on paper. And now I'm going to talk through them, and we'll see what it turns into. So the thing I started to think about today after Disloyal was that the pandemic began 7 months ago, and I find myself working from home with a lot of time on my hands and no one to exchange ideas with. And I've just know this about myself. That's what I need. I got to bounce ideas. I have to make the idea known, because it starts, half formed in my brain. But once you put it on paper, you can look at it from a different way. And then once you talk through it, it kind of completes and wraps up the thought, or at least at the very least, it progresses it to another stage, and it becomes a better formed idea, because I can be a little bit more objective about it. One of the things we're going to talk about today is critical thinking. And if you do a Google search for critical thinking, what comes up seems very basic, but the steps, people don't really employ the steps necessary when they're trying to think critically. So in most cases, even smart people are not critical thinkers. It's stuff. Let's just go through this list that I copy and pasted from just the first thing that came up on Google. All right, critical thinking. Understand the links between ideas. Determine the importance and relevance of arguments and ideas. That's a big one. Understand the links between ideas, and then determine the importance and relevance of arguments and ideas. This is something that's really important to me. It doesn't matter what someone thinks, but it very much matters how they thought and how they got to the end goal. None of us can control our starting factors. We were born to a family we didn't choose, in a body we largely don't have control over. We are animals put in an environment, and biology has done most of the work to get you to the starting point before you're even conscious, like before you're even awake and able to make decisions. And even as a young person, I just think back of all the stupid things that I did. I didn't have a fully formed brain. Like I would be sitting in my job at work at 16, 17 years old, or in class in school, just bored. I couldn't stop like shaking my leg up and down, or like I wanted to get out of the classroom. I was bored. I wanted to stay up late, and like I had to wake up early and get to class. Like it was just a bunch of stuff I didn't want to do. And over time, I started to give myself credit because I got more patient as I grew older and matured. But how much of that was me thinking I gotta chill out, or I gotta make myself happy, versus just biology doing its natural course of taking 17, 18, 19, 20, all the way up till you have a fully formed frontal lobe at 25, 26, 27 years old, which is where I'm at now. Like, biology did most of the work. Yes, there's maturity, and I could take credit for that. But all we have left is not biology. It's how we go about thinking. So, obviously, like, worrying about, like, racism or what gender someone is like, largely they can't even control these factors. So placing an emphasis on the ideas goes above that. It something like I heard, small-minded people talk about things, so that's kind of materialism. Moderate-minded people gossip and talk about other people, but high-level smart people talk about ideas and values, and I've always looked up to that. I've always been more interested in smart people because then I can learn something from them. I don't consider myself a very smart person. I went to college for a business degree, and then I got a master's in business. That I'm proud of the fact that I got a master's, but anybody who could sit through a college classroom could probably get a master's in business. It's not technically complex. The hardest thing we do is statistics, but there is an element of critical thinking, and just because anybody can get a master's in business doesn't mean that you could get the full experience from the program. Things like learning how to apply all the good things you've learned in all your classes to the real world. That's what an MBA is preparing you to do. Very quickly, there's two types of MBA students: those that want to advance their career, so they currently have a career and they just want to get a promotion, so they learn the aspects to make them more suited for the job that they have. Or the MBA student that I was, which was, I just dream of owning my own company one day, and I wanted to get myself as educated as possible to achieve that dream. What I learned was a lot of book knowledge, but you must apply that book knowledge. So the MBA can only take you so far. The rest of it is application of what you already know from a book. But anyway, what we did learn was critical thinking. And let's continue on with this list. The third one is recognize, build, and appraise arguments. This is very similar to law school, and getting a master's in business is definitely no law school. And one day I may end up trying law school, although I don't want to go to school again, but neither here nor there. It is important to build your argument. Trying to convince someone that they ought to have an opinion, they ought to be thinking. I'm not interested in, if you're listening to this, you probably are someone that enjoys thinking the same way that I'm talking about. So you've already recognized the importance of ideas and arguments, and that's where you have to build these up. You have to talk through them. You have to get rid of your old bad ideas. And then you look out in someone else, and just because they believe a bad thought now, or, a non-smart thought, give them the opportunity to build their argument as they go along. And I have a different viewpoint if it's a 20-year-old who's idealistic and, wants things that are impossible, like having a utopia, versus a 50-year-old, or worse, a 74-year-old who is so deeply caught up in their ideology that, or mental illness like narcissism, or ego, that they can't. There's no helping them. So I just have a different viewpoint based on where that comes from. The fourth bullet point in what critical thinking is an aspect of it is identify inconsistencies and errors in reasoning. The next one is approach problems in a consistent and systematic way. This is a great one. The last one is reflect on the justification of their own assumptions, beliefs, and values. This is so important. Just reflecting on why you think what you think, and always attempt, is there room to innovate that? Can I forget what's holding me back? Because when you take on a solution, a lot of times you have a problem, the problem is complex. So you try to tackle that problem. Well, the solution you implement is like squishing a square peg into a round hole. It might go in, but you're going to have some inefficiencies. So leave back the parts that are sticking out or they don't fit with the solution to the problem. And people will take the extreme and they'll say, oh, just don't even solve the problem, or why do you spend so time doing that? It's like, well, because I'm trying to be better at it. I'm trying to not just jam the solution in. I'm trying to figure this thing out and constantly better my understanding of how best to solve the problem. So in the past 7 months, since, we haven't been on strict quarantine. We were there for a couple months, but I've left the house, and but I just found myself with a lot more time. I'm working from home. I listen to like a ton of podcasts throughout the day. So there's a lot of other people thinking, between my ears, and I'm kind of thinking through how other people are thinking, and you get a really good insight into how their brain operates. So I recently found a great comedian. His name is Tim Dillon. He does the Tim Dillon Show. He's fascinating to me. I would describe him as nihilistic, cynical, sarcastic, and fatalistic. He worked as a subprime mortgage lender, and he kind of runs a one-man comedy show where it's just him talking for an hour and a half. And he's a big fat guy that he's so interesting, and I think he's worth talking about. He's been a guest on the Joe Rogan Experience a couple times, and it's always been great. He's real funny. He covers like topics on the billionaire class. He grew up in Long Island in New York, and very like him and everyone around him growing up, including his parents, had a very like lower class, middle class mentality. He had substance abuse problems with cocaine and alcohol, and he's now sober. And against my own better judgment, I've been fascinated by conspiracy theories that Tim Dillon brings up on his show. And so one of them was, okay, so a couple of these conspiracy theories. The big one is Epstein. And, he had an island that many famous, notable people like Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, and Alan Dershowitz, and, just names that people have said on the news and on podcasts and stuff, visited the island. And there's a Netflix series that outlines all these people and what their connection was to Jeffrey Epstein and the island that he allegedly had underage girls and like sex parties and stuff. So as a conspiracy theory goes, I remember hearing about it like in the early 2000s, just like you just hear about your friend. It's like, you're talking with your friends or whatever, and the internet is around and forums are around. And, like there's a pedophile island where billionaires go to rape kids. And, it's so ridiculous that you're like, there's no way that could be true. And here I am in 2020, and prominent comedians with thousands of followers and Netflix series with victims, it's turning out that was exactly true. So that's fascinating. That is not a UFO conspiracy theory. It's not 9/11 didn't happen. It's not out there. It was a conspiracy theory, and now it's true. That fascinates me. There's ridiculous conspiracy theories, as there always has been. And then there's ones that I'm not sure. Like, I don't know much about them. So the Clinton body count. Apparently there's many people that the Clintons, that were against the Clintons that ended up dead. And there's a lot of books written about that. Tim Dillon talks about it a lot. But the one he talked about recently that I've gotten into is about the Bushes, especially about George Bush Sr. And so I am, according to the Kindle, 12% through with the book by Russ Baker, and it's called Family of Secrets. And it outlines how George Bush Sr. was a member of the CIA. He went on to become the CIA director. There is some questioning evidence from this investigative journalist about George Bush Sr.'s whereabouts, especially like on the day that JFK was assassinated. And what I've covered so far in the book is just establishing George Bush Sr.'s early life and how a lot of it's shrouded in mystery. But it is written like a hit piece. Clearly the author does not like George Bush Sr. By the way, it was published in 2008. So as George W. Bush's term was ending, second term. And, the author seems like someone who doesn't like the Bushes and decided to write a book about it. And it's very, very well researched. But I'm hesitant to buy in yet. It sounds like a man who's a journalist who's writing a book that is putting into question everything that George Bush Sr. is doing. And it's kind of stretching. There's nothing concrete that I've read in this book, 12% in, that convinces me that the Bushes are an evil family. I will keep it updated as I do another episode. Now, most people are not equipped, from my experience, to have an interesting conversation about these conspiracy theories. The conversations I hear about these conspiracy theories are from YouTube videos, online debates, and comedians on podcasts. Specifically on the Joe Rogan Experience and a streamer I watch who he was on Twitch. He's on YouTube now. Destiny. So Stephen Bunnell the second. And I've been watching him for years. I've been a fan at, varying levels, up and down. Sometimes I like him. Sometimes I kind of personally disagree with him, and so I spend less time watching his content. But he has become a very good, he does lots of debates, good at argument, good at argumentation, good at realizing that debates are useless in the first place if you don't have an agreement to get at the core values. This is an important thing because it means when I watch a Stephen Destiny Bunnell debate, I can already know that there's probably going to be an element of he wouldn't be talking to this person if it was just surface level nonsense. Now, he breaks that a lot too because he just wants to create content and he gets himself frustrated But that has happened increasingly, or on a decreasing level. So it just happens less and less. Personally, I value critical thinking and skepticism. I try not to believe stuff until I have good reason to. I have, like I described, the college degree in business and the master's in business. Throughout that program, we were given studies, and we were tasked with finding the root cause of like a company's problem. So I'll describe those briefly. We were given case studies, so we had to buy them from the Harvard Business Review. They were between $3 and $10 for between 15 and 25 pages of paper. And you would buy a single case study. So it might be 17 pages long, and you were asked to read through it, and it describes a company, it describes maybe the founders, how they started, maybe some history, where their operations are now, did they grow globally, did they grow into what sectors, and then there's graphs and charts at the end and miscellaneous data, and the entire case each case would end with a question. What could, and usually something along the lines of, what could the owners have done better? And your job was to write 1,000 words, or oftentimes they encourage us to write it very briefly. So bullet points, or like a paragraph or two that was simple and to the point. The hard part was doing all the thinking beforehand to get to the hard part was reading through it, disseminating which information was important and which information was not important, and then of the information that is important, how do you tackle that? And then of that, how do you write it in a solution? And then when you write it down in a solution, how do you synthesize that so that you can deliver it to someone who may only give it a minute of reading time? Like, they're not going to go through and look at your studies, look at your graphs, look at your charts. They want a quick answer in 5 minutes or less. Because if you're trying to pitch anything in a job to people up the chain, by the very nature of it, their time is more important than yours. So if you're going to make a suggestion, you have few minutes to do it, and you better make your case compelling, quick, and just by the nature of business, because we don't do hyper technical problems. Usually they're once you explain the problem, the solution, getting to the problem is 90% there. 10% is the actual implementation of the solution. Now, that's not always true. When you're trying to start a company, implementing is the hardest part, so it kind of flips it on its face. But hopefully you listening have some framework from what I'm talking about. But problems in business and problems in, should I start this product or this product? Should I expand to this area or this area? It's just 90% of it is trying to identify what is the problem you're trying to solve. Okay, here's the solution, and that's the easy part at the end. So that's how business case studies would go. They have routine nature that was like this, like all the time. They give you way more facts than necessary. It's on the reader to analyze the relevant information and then ignore the non-essential information. It's not law school, but they did teach us how to think critically. I wrote here in quotes, so I lifted this from one of the Google searches I did about critical thinking. Critical thinking is objective analysis and evaluation of an issue in order to form a judgment. If you've gotten this far and you're just looking for a quick way to know if you're thinking critically or not, when you look at a situation, just ask the W's and the how. So who, what, where, why, when, and how. And that gets you most of the way. Wrapping up, and I will continue the song because I had a good time doing this, and I'll listen to it back and see if it was rambling or if it was on a good track. And I think it's mostly been on a good track. Comedians and fighters and people with bad opinions, and just they don't think for a living. They do what they do for a living. They make people laugh, or they fight, or they, they're not scientists. They're not thinkers. They're not people that sit around and go, how do we solve the world's problems? They might think that, but they're not in a position to action on it at all. These kind of people show up on like the Joe Rogan Experience, and there's just a rampant use or non-use of critical thinking skills. When Eddie Bravo's trying to tell people that space is fake or 9/11 didn't happen, and who knows if 9/11 happened exactly the way the 9/11 Commission report said it did. We're not sure, but outrageous claims require further analysis, and that analysis usually breaks down. If you have a group of engineers telling people that the buildings, the way they burned, was abnormal for the way the 9/11 Commission report said it did, now we're getting interest. Like, that's interesting. This is a whole other rabbit hole to go down, but I just haven't heard anything convincing. Maybe I should watch some documentaries or something. I'm sure I'll get back to it because that's interesting. And I did watch there's a documentary called Loose Change. It was the first YouTube viral hit, which is kind of the director and editor put together a movie using pretty solid editing techniques to film it like a thriller documentary. It kind of made you feel on edge and went over why 9/11 didn't happen. And it was compelling and interesting, but I'm not convinced of that yet. I think 9/11 was a terrible tragedy that I do not think our government faked. But it's fun to analyze these things, and this entire thing that I'm doing is not going to just be about conspiracy theories, but those are interesting, and they're a good place to start, and it's what I'm reading and doing with my thinking right now. But anyway, so I do think there are critical thinking skills from certain people. Destiny, I already mentioned, the streamer. I think he exhibits a lot of those. Then there's a pair of brothers that they're in their 50s. Bret and Eric Weinstein. These two brothers, one is a biologist, Bret, and one is has a PhD in math, and he works for Peter Thiel in corporate financing, something like that. And they both have podcasts, and I listen to them. Very smart guys. Eric Weinstein has a theory, a mathematical theory that he calls geometric unity, that he claims will upend standard science perpetuated by the gatekeepers in the STEM departments and research universities. He calls the process where people are keeping out radical ideas, he calls that network the distributed idea suppression complex. And his theory that he has been trying to push through may or may not be correct, but that's not the point. The point is there is a network of people gatekeeping, saying no new ideas. And so he fights against that. And then Bret Weinstein has a podcast that I really like, that a live stream he's been doing once or twice a week with his wife, who's also a biologist, evolutionary biologist. And they just live stream it from their house in Portland, and they cover politics. They cover all the craziness, all the crazy things that have happened in 2020, and just reasonable, nuanced, good thinkers. It's challenged me to think and made me smarter just by listening to live streams. So, okay, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you so much for listening. I expect to have more to come. See you next time.